What if the sweetest fruit you've been avoiding is actually the one your metabolism desperately needs right now? Most people trying to lose fat or fix their blood sugar are told to stay away from sweet fruits entirely. Mango sits at the top of that avoid list for almost every dietitian, every low-carb coach, and every metabolic health influencer out there. And honestly, that advice makes surface-level sense. Mango is sweet. It's rich in natural sugar. It feels like the wrong move. But there is a 24-week controlled clinical trial that says something completely different. And the results genuinely stopped researchers in their tracks. The people eating mango every single day lost body fat. Their blood sugar dropped. Their insulin resistance improved measurably over time. The control group ate the exact same number of calories from a different source. Their metabolic health got worse across nearly every marker measured. Same calories. Completely opposite biological outcomes. That is not a coincidence. That is your biology telling you something important. Once you understand why this is happening at a mechanistic level, you will never look at food the same way again. That is not an exaggeration. So here is exactly what we are covering today. First, the actual study. Every detail that matters, not just the headline numbers. Then we go into the mechanisms. What mango is doing inside your gut. What it is doing directly inside your cells. And then the practical framework. The right amount, the right timing, the right pairing strategy to actually capture these benefits. Let's start with the study, because the details here are what make this either incredibly useful or easy to misapply. This was a controlled trial published in the journal Foods. Real adults. Real pre-diabetes diagnoses. Randomized into two groups for 24 full weeks. One group ate 300 grams of fresh mango every single day. That is roughly 10 ounces, about one medium to large mango. The other group ate a calorie-matched granola bar every day. Same caloric intake. That was the only rule the researchers enforced. Here is the most critical thing to understand about this study. It was not a weight loss study. Nobody was put in a caloric deficit. The researchers were not trying to make people lose weight. They were trying to isolate what researchers call the food matrix effect. The question was simple, but profound. What happens when calories are identical, but the food source is completely different? Does biology respond the same way? After 24 weeks, the answer was clear, and it was unambiguous. The food source changed everything about the outcome. The mango group ended the study with fasting blood glucose levels nearly 18.5 milligrams per deciliter lower than the granola bar group. Think carefully about what that number means. Both groups ate the same calories every single day for 6 months straight. But one group's blood sugar was dramatically better controlled. Not marginally, not slightly. Nearly 18.5 points lower on fasting glucose. HbA1c is your long-term blood sugar marker. It reflects your average blood glucose over roughly 3 months. This is what doctors track. In the mango group, HbA1c stayed completely stable throughout the entire 24-week period. In the granola bar group, it climbed upward. People eating the processed calorie-matched granola bar were getting worse metabolically while eating the exact same number of calories. That is remarkable. Insulin resistance was measured using a calculation called HOMA-IR. In the mango group, HOMA-IR decreased. Insulin resistance improved significantly. In the granola bar group, HOMA-IR increased. Their insulin resistance worsened over the same 6-month period, eating the same caloric load. Insulin sensitivity was measured separately through something called Quickie. Mango group held steady. Granola bar group declined noticeably. Now here is the part that genuinely surprised the researchers, because this was never supposed to happen in this particular study design. The mango group dropped body fat percentage from 30.5% down to 29.1%. That is 1.4% of body fat lost with no caloric deficit created. No structured exercise intervention. No deliberate weight loss protocol of any kind. Just switching the source of daily calories from a granola bar to fresh mango. Fat-free mass increased in the mango group. Waist to hip ratio improved. In the granola bar group, there was no meaningful positive change anywhere. So the question that needs answering is obvious. What is mango doing inside the body that a calorie-matched granola bar simply cannot do? Because by conventional nutritional logic, none of this should be happening. Mango is sweet, high in natural sugar. Pre-diabetics should theoretically struggle with it. And yet, the data produced the opposite result across every single metabolic marker the researchers measured. So we need to understand the mechanism. There are two distinct biological pathways through which mango produces these effects. And the fascinating part is, they do not just work independently. They reinforce each other. They amplify each other. The combined result is far more powerful than either pathway could produce working alone. The first pathway starts in your gut. Mango contains a very specific combination of fiber and polyphenols that most foods simply do not have together. The polyphenols in mango are not generic plant compounds. They include specific molecules called mangiferin, quercetin, and gallitanins. These are bioactive and biologically active. Your digestive system cannot fully break these compounds down on its own. So they travel through your upper digestive tract largely intact. They arrive in your lower gut where your microbiome lives. And this is where things start getting genuinely interesting from a metabolic standpoint. A 2025 study published in Frontiers in Nutrition examines specifically what these mango compounds do when they reach the gut microbiome environment. The fiber and polyphenols together selectively feed beneficial bacterial strains. Not all bacteria equally, specifically the ones associated with reduced inflammation and better insulin function. These bacteria, once properly nourished by mango's compounds, produce something called short-chain fatty acids. And the most metabolically important of these is butyrate. Butyrate has been studied extensively in recent years, and it does two things that are directly relevant to everything we are discussing here today. First, butyrate physically strengthens your gut barrier. The lining that separates your intestinal contents from your bloodstream becomes more intact and less permeable. Second, butyrate actively reduces systemic inflammation throughout the entire body. Not just in the gut, systemically. That distinction matters enormously. Here is the connection most people miss entirely. Chronic inflammation and insulin resistance are not separate independent problems happening in your body. They are mechanistically linked. Inflammation directly drives insulin resistance. Reducing gut inflammation through butyrate production directly improves insulin sensitivity. That relationship is well established in research. But the gut mechanism goes even further than butyrate alone. When gut bacteria metabolize mango's specific polyphenols, they produce additional compounds. These include phenylpropionate and endopropionate. These metabolites further tighten the gut lining and reduce what researchers call intestinal permeability. When your gut barrier is stronger and less leaky, the immune and metabolic signals throughout your entire body become better regulated and more precise. Less inflammation circulating through the bloodstream, less water retention, less of the chronic low-grade immune activation that quietly wrecks metabolic health over time. Now here is what the research showed about these two components working together. The short-chain fatty acids and polyphenol metabolites together produce a synergistic effect. The combined anti-inflammatory impact is more than double what either compound produces individually. This is not additive. This is genuinely synergistic amplification. You are not simply getting fiber's benefits plus polyphenol's benefits stacked together. You are getting a compounded biological effect that neither could achieve alone. That is the first pathway. Now, the second pathway operates completely independently of the gut and directly at the level of individual cells. There is a protein inside your cells called AMP. The full name is adenosine monophosphate activated protein kinase. Think of it as your cell's master energy sensor. When AMP gets activated, it triggers several things simultaneously. It stimulates glucose uptake into the cell. It increases fat burning. It inhibits new fat creation and storage. AMP activation essentially shifts your cells into a highly metabolically efficient state where they prefer burning fuel over storing it. You want this activated. You know when AMP gets activated most powerfully and reliably? During exercise, during extended fasting, during meaningful caloric restriction over time. These are the conditions your body historically associates with needing to become more metabolically efficient to survive. AMP is the switch that flips that mode on. A food chemistry study that examined the bioactive compounds in mango found something that genuinely changes the picture of how we think about nutrition. Mango extract upregulates AMP activity, meaning mango is triggering the same metabolic switch that exercise and fasting trigger, but through a nutritional mechanism, not a stress one. The compounds driving this cellular effect are a class of polyphenolic metabolites, including benzophenone derivatives. And notice something important here about these compounds. These are the same class of metabolites produced when your gut bacteria metabolize mango's polyphenols. The gut pathway and the cellular pathway are feeding the same downstream effect. Two different biological routes converging on the same metabolic outcome. That is why the effects compound so powerfully in the research data. There was a separate study published in the journal Diabetes that looked specifically at mangiferin. That is the primary polyphenol found in mango tissue. The findings were very specific and very striking. Mangiferin protected against high-fat diet-induced weight gain in study subjects. It protected against diet-induced insulin resistance. It increased glucose oxidation directly inside muscle tissue. And it activated an enzyme called pyruvate dehydrogenase. This enzyme controls how your body processes carbohydrates at the metabolic gateway. The researchers included a note in their findings that is worth sitting with for a moment because it really reframes how you think about this fruit. They said mangiferin mimics the effects of AMP activators, meaning it signals your cells to behave as though you are in a caloric deficit even when you are not. A compound naturally present in mango tells your cells to upregulate fat burning, improve glucose handling, and inhibit fat storage without any actual deficit being present. That is not a vague wellness claim. That is a specific, documented biochemical mechanism supported by peer-reviewed research in a major diabetes journal. And it explains every single outcome that appeared in that 24-week clinical trial. The fat loss, the blood sugar improvement, the insulin resistance reversal, all of it. Now understanding the science matters. But knowing how to apply it without accidentally undoing the benefit, that is where the real practical value lives. Because mango is doing something extraordinary, but quantity and timing are not irrelevant. They still shape how much benefit you actually capture from this. The study used 300 grams of fresh mango daily. That is roughly 10 ounces or about 1 medium to large mango. That is your reference point. If you are pre-diabetic, insulin resistant, or actively working to improve metabolic health, that amount is a reasonable and appropriate daily target to work toward. Treat this as your primary carbohydrate source on the days you include it. Do not simply stack it on top of an already high carbohydrate eating pattern. The benefits in the research emerged over weeks of consistent use, not days, not 1 or 2 servings. This is a longer-term nutritional strategy, not an acute fix. Now, here is something that surprises most people when they hear it. I do not recommend eating your mango in the morning. The timing matters significantly. In the morning, particularly after not eating overnight, your body is in a lightly fasted metabolic state. Insulin is naturally low. This is valuable. Your body has a genuine opportunity to tap into stored fat for fuel during those morning hours when insulin is suppressed. That is a metabolically productive window. If you introduce mango during that window, you raise insulin, provide glucose for immediate fuel use, and interrupt that fat-burning opportunity before it fully develops. Mango's long-term benefits on insulin resistance are real and documented. But those long-term benefits do not override the acute short-term insulin response from eating carbohydrates. Keep mornings lower in carbohydrates. Let your body use that naturally fasted state to access stored fat. Add some light movement to compound that effect further. Physical activity, even a walk, increases insulin sensitivity in real time. Pairing low-carb mornings with movement creates a compounding metabolic advantage throughout the early hours. Save the mango for the evening. Have it with or after dinner. By then, your day's activity has already done meaningful work on your insulin sensitivity. Your muscle glycogen has been partially depleted through daily movement and activity. Your muscles are primed and ready to absorb glucose efficiently without requiring excessive insulin output. Now, beyond timing, how you eat the mango matters as much as when. A meta-analysis in the journal Nutrition examined protein's effect on glucose response. The finding was consistent across every protein type studied. Animal protein, dairy protein, plant protein, all of them blunted the postprandial blood glucose spike from carbohydrates. Protein affects hormones called GLP-1 and GIP. It improves insulin efficiency. It gives your body additional tools to handle incoming carbohydrates without overreacting with excessive insulin secretion. The most practical way to apply this is straightforward. Mix your mango serving into Greek yogurt or cottage cheese and eat it that way. You get the polyphenol and fiber benefits of the mango itself. You get the protein-mediated glucose blunting from the dairy. You get satiety that lasts longer. One additional thing worth being mindful about: try not to combine large amounts of dietary fat with your mango serving in that same meal. Fat combined with carbohydrates in significant quantities creates a metabolic environment where the body tends to prioritize burning the carbohydrate and store the incoming dietary fat. It is not catastrophic, but it is not optimal when you are specifically trying to leverage mango's metabolic benefits. Keep fat moderate when mango is part of the meal. Now, if your schedule allows it, there is one additional layer you can stack on top of everything else we have covered. Exercise timing. When you exercise, particularly in a fasted or lower carbohydrate state, your body activates AMP. It pulls from fat stores for fuel. Muscle glycogen depletes. And crucially, exercise increases GLUT4 translocation. That is the mechanism by which muscle cells move glucose transporters to their surface to absorb glucose rapidly and efficiently. When you eat mango after that exercise session, you are delivering glucose and polyphenols into a body already biologically primed by movement to receive and use them well. A study examining pre-meal versus post-meal exercise found the group that exercised before eating had measurably lower postprandial insulin levels and better overall glucose handling afterward. The exercise made the subsequent meal more metabolically efficient. Movement primed the system. The food worked better because the body was already in the right state. If you can exercise in the afternoon and eat your mango serving in the early evening as your post-workout carbohydrate, that is the optimal combination available. You are combining AMP activation from the workout with the AMP mimicking effect of mango's polyphenols. Two activation signals reinforcing the same downstream metabolic outcome simultaneously. You are refilling depleted glycogen with a carbohydrate source that simultaneously improves your gut environment and signals cells toward fat burning rather than fat storage. You are lowering insulin demand, building metabolic flexibility, and improving glucose handling all at the same time through strategic stacking of these compatible inputs. Now let us step back from the mango specifically, because this study is really pointing at something much larger about how we understand food and nutrition. We have been trained for decades to evaluate food primarily through calories and macronutrients. Calories in versus calories out. A gram of sugar is a gram of sugar. And thermodynamically speaking, that framework is not wrong. Energy balance absolutely matters. But it is profoundly incomplete as a framework for understanding metabolic outcomes. What this research demonstrates clearly is that two foods can be calorically identical, macronutrient comparable, and still produce metabolic outcomes on completely opposite ends of the spectrum. Not because physics was violated, but because food is not simply fuel. Food is biological information. It is signals and instructions your body is constantly interpreting and responding to. The fiber in whole mango slows digestion and selectively feeds beneficial gut bacteria in ways that refined carbohydrates simply cannot replicate regardless of their calorie count. The polyphenols trigger AMP, strengthen the gut lining, reduce inflammation, and produce metabolites that shift cellular metabolism toward efficiency. A granola bar does none of that. The synergy between mango's fiber and polyphenols produces an anti-inflammatory, insulin-sensitizing effect that more than doubles what either compound achieves working alone. That does not appear on any label. None of this biological activity is captured in a calorie count. None of it shows up in a macronutrient breakdown. And yet all of it is determining your metabolic trajectory. A whole mango and a processed granola bar can share the same calorie count and send your biology down completely different paths over weeks and months of consistent intake. A whole potato and potato starch and a processed food are not interchangeable despite similar macros. Fresh fruit and fruit juice are not equivalent despite similar sugar content. The delivery system matters. The food matrix matters. The full biological context of what you are eating matters far more than the number on a nutrition label. If you have been avoiding fruit because someone told you the sugar content would spike your insulin or stall your fat loss, the research is asking you to look again. Not to ignore sugar entirely, not to pretend quantity does not matter. It does. Timing matters. Pairing matters. Strategic use of any food still applies here. But the idea that all sugars behave identically in the body, that mango and refined sugar occupy the same biological space, that sweet means harmful, that does not hold up. The context of the sugar changes the outcome. The compounds that come packaged with the sugar change the outcome. The effect on your gut microbiome changes the outcome. Where the sugar came from and what biological machinery came along with it, that is what your body is actually responding to at every level of metabolism. That is the framework shift that this research demands. And it is a meaningful one worth sitting with as you make daily food decisions going forward. If you have been playing it safe, cutting fruit, treating every gram of natural sugar as a threat, the evidence is suggesting a more nuanced and more useful picture. Not all sugars behave the same way inside your body. Not all sweet foods produce the same metabolic response. Food is far more complex than its sugar content alone suggests. Sometimes the food that looks like the worst possible choice on the surface is doing something quietly and profoundly beneficial underneath it at the biological level. Mango is one of the clearest examples of that principle that current research has produced. Use it strategically. Use it consistently. Be patient with the timeline. Give the gut microbiome time to respond. Give the cellular mechanisms time to establish. Give the long-term AMP effects time to compound. This is not a one-week experiment. Pay close attention to how your body responds over weeks of consistent strategic use. Because if the research is any indication, it might genuinely surprise you.